New Zealand's foreign minister has unveiled an extra $700 million New Zealand dollars, $654 million, in foreign aid over the next 4 years, largely for Pacific nations, and hinted Australia will be boosting its own spending. The opposition National Party criticised the announcement, saying the government had put diplomats ahead of domestic priorities. Tonight's budget is intended to work as an election precursor, but it could work in Labour's favour. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has told the party room today that this will be the budget that will define the next election campaign. There have been hints he will call an election for early 2019, ahead of the budget delivery date of May 18. However, Nine finance editor Ross Greenwood said this means the money made available in tonight's budget could also be available to Labour to fund campaign pledges and policies. As a reminder, this was ScoMo's pitch to the electorate about what the budget will include. The trouble with budget blogs is finding images to break up the parade of politicians and numbers. So here, have a quick rest with this beautiful sunset, courtesy of the Bureau of Meteorology. And if the boss asks, it's a metaphor for infrastructure spending. These art shots of today's Question Time are showing a fair range of moods. From happy, Julie Bishop and Peter Dutton, up to, well, we're not entirely certain, a bit school teacher-ish. The Twitter sphere has taken to a budget hashtag with gusto, sharing a plea for the government to hashtag keep my $10. People are urging Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull and Treasurer Scott Morrison to not pass on tax cuts, and instead spend the money on a variety of initiatives. We think ScoMo would rather be Santa than Milhouse. Nobody wants to be Milhouse. The final Question Time before the budget drops tonight saw some fiery back and forth between Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull and opposition leader Bill Shorten, as they verbally tussled over remarks made by former Treasurer Peter Costello. Mr. Costello, who was a long-serving treasurer in the Howard government, warned that spending needed to be brought under control. It took us 10 surplus budgets to pay off last time. You would be doing well to pay a bit off in 10 surplus budgets this time, Mr. Costello told the ABC 7.30 report program. I think the probabilities are we will never get back to where we were. You and I will die before that happens. Mr. Shorten seized the opportunity in Parliament today, referencing Mr. Costello's remarks. Will the Prime Minister confirm that his government's record includes a gross debt increase to a record $500 billion, net debt doubling, and net debt as a proportion of the economy is growing more rapidly than almost every advanced economy in the world? He said. Mr. Turnbull was happy to hit back. Labour spent that cash at the bank that Peter Costello left them, after the Labour Party came in 2007, and set us up with a structural deficit that we have been unwinding ever since, he said. Mr. Turnbull and Treasurer Scott Morrison have both claimed tonight's budget will be a responsible one. Scott Morrison's month of flagging middle and lower income tax cuts has helped buck a pre-budget trend of a fall in consumer confidence, an analyst says. The latest ANZ Roy Morgan Consumer Confidence Index has risen 0.3% to a 13-week high of 119.6, in contrast to the typical slide in confidence ahead of the budget. The reality is confidence has been rising steadily over the past 4 weeks alongside budget leaks, So in a way the good news is already baked in the numbers, ANZ's head of Australian economics David Plank said on Tuesday. Over the past month, Mr. Morrison has indicated lower and middle-income taxpayers could be in for income tax cuts, while the July 2019 increase in the Medicare levy for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, could also be scrapped following a lift in government revenue. Since 2013, in the week leading up to the release of the federal budget, ANZ's average weekly confidence is 112.0 and then usually dips by 1.2% on average in the week immediately following. It's pretty hard for a budget to boost confidence, Mr. Plank said. The Australian share market has closed flat ahead of the federal budget and US President Donald Trump's decision on the Iran nuclear deal. The benchmark S&P/ASX 200 index was up 7.4 points, or 0.12%, to 6,091.9 points, while the broader All Ordinaries index was up 7.6 points, or 0.12%, at 6,183.2 points. The SPI 200 futures contract was up 7 points, or 0.12%, at 6,071 points. Our bold prediction: Turnbull will love it. Shorten might have some criticisms. We should have thought of this for our guys in the lockup. Australians will get money back in their pockets as Treasurer Scott Morrison delivers a pre-election budget. Tonight's budget could also return to surplus a year early, in 2019-20, thanks to a spike in company taxes and record job growth. It's a budget that will ensure hard-working Australians can keep more of the money they earn, Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull told Cabinet in Canberra yesterday. Read the full story here. Malcolm Turnbull has vowed to sell the government's latest budget all the way to the next election. The Prime Minister, addressing a meeting of Liberal and Nationals MPs in Canberra today, urged his colleagues to personalise the budget message of a strong economic plan for jobs and growth and one that delivered tax relief, ensured the delivery of essential services as well as providing funding for new infrastructure to make life better for Australians. Mr. Turnbull noted the budget's better-than-expected revenue booty was down to the creation of 1 million jobs during the life of the government and 130,000 fewer people on welfare. As well, the government had delivered the lowest spending growth in 50 years, he said. The Prime Minister reiterated his commitment to an election early next year, leaving open the possibility of another budget before voters go to the polls. Former Treasurer Peter Costello thinks we will all be dead and buried by the time the federal government has paid off the nation's debt. Mr. Costello warned until spending was under control Australia wouldn't be in a position to pay back money owed. It took us 10 surplus budgets to pay off last time. You would be doing well to pay a bit off in 10 surplus budgets this time, Mr. Costello told the ABC 7.30 report program. I think the probabilities are we will never get back to where we were. You and I will die before that happens. Read the full story here. His cabinet colleagues are calling him the infrastructure prime minister, and it's a tag Malcolm Turnbull is happy to wear, along with his high-vis vest. On the eve of the federal budget, Mr. Turnbull splashed another $400 million to duplicate the Port Botany rail line in Sydney. He said it would bust congestion and allow drivers to get home sooner and safely. One train would take 50 semi-trailers off the roads. It's part of a promised $75 billion over 10 years for major road and rail projects around the nation. Read the full story here. Tax cuts of about $10 a week, and a massive aged care package, will be the centerpieces of Scott Morrison's pre-election budget tonight. The Treasurer is also expected to announce a return to surplus a year earlier than expected. Mr. Morrison gave no details when he arrived at Parliament House this morning, but promised a plan for lower taxes and for reducing the pressure on households. Read the full story here.